There's right ways or better ways to leave assets to churches and charities. And there's ways that are, less effective.
Right.
Welcome to today's Retirees with Certified Financial Planner Wayne Maslyk of Great Lakes Benefits and Wealth Management. Anchored in family values, Wayne offers practical advice to help you get the most out of your retirement years. For more information, visit today'sretirees.com. Now, here's your host.
And welcome to today's Retirees with Certified Financial Planner Wayne Maslyk of Great Lakes Benefits and Wealth Management. The book of Proverbs tells us that a good man or a wise man, depending on which version you look at, leaves an inheritance to his children's children. Today's program, we're going to be talking a little bit about leaving things to our family members and a little bit about how to do that.
Yeah, leaving things and also to other heirs, too, other persons or places of interest. And not just at death either. A lot of planning has to do with planning around death, unfortunately. Right. So I don't know what word to use, when the time comes, I guess.
Right. Rush Limbaugh used the word "my event."
His event? Yeah.
I just heard his widow, after his passing, she was talking about it one day. She says, we just called it the event.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, so when the event happens... But we can be doing things up until our event also.
Sure.
And which could also help us presently too, tax-wise and in other areas. So being we just got through tax season, I felt it was a good time to put this topic together.
Sure.
And just refresh some of our listeners who might have heard this before. But some of it, we're talking about some new things today also.
Sure. Now, when we think about leaving an inheritance, and as you just mentioned, you don't always, depending on how the Lord has blessed you through your life and your working career and your investments and all of those things, there may be funds there that you want to give to, a charity, your church, a ministry, humane society, whatever it is. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do that. But when you're figuring that out, that's part of the plan that you help folks put together, is it not?
Well, I try.
Right.
I try. I always ask if there's a charitable intent to their estate plan. And most of the time, like 99% of the time, initially, the knee-jerk response is no.
Okay.
Because when you go have your will, you're going to say, I leave everything to my spouse if you have one, and after them, I leave everything to my kids.
Okay, sure.
That's a simple will. And when you're filling out your beneficiary designations for your life insurance and your IRAs and your annuities or your POD or TOD accounts, it's normally the spouse and then my kids.
Okay.
And they don't think charity at the time.
Okay.
So I do like getting people to I guess, be aware of the options, not just at our death, but through life also. Because most people, I just said most people don't have that in their estate plan, but most people give regularly throughout their life, whether it's weekly in church or their favorite charities, like you had said, St. Jude, their Wounded Warriors, the Humane Society, whatever, they're giving regularly. And with most people's estate plan or financial plan, it stops at their death.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to. If people are aware of the benefits of leaving some charitable assets to some charitable organizations, they become more interested in it. And not just at death either, along through their life. And that's what we're going to talk about, some of the specifics in today's show, as to where if you're a charitable person, where you could be aware of the things you could be doing now to include that maybe a little more than what they've been.
Okay. Now, when you work with a family, or you working with folks, and you're let's say that they are an ongoing giver. They help charities. You can determine what that is. Is there the tax rules changed a few years ago?
Yeah, and that's the problem. When you're doing planning, we do tax returns for our clients. We focus on our money management clients, people that have assets in one of my investment portfolios. We do extremely discounted tax preparation.
Correct. Yes.
But since the tax laws have changed, most folks aren't keeping track, or they're not as aware of the giving that they've been doing, especially with communicating it to their financial planner.
Okay.
Me. Yes, when we sit with them to do their taxes, we do ask those questions as far as giving, because there's ways to still benefit from giving, even if in any single year you're not getting over the standard deduction limits that we were all used to, a handful of years ago. So the advisor, the planner, needs to ask the folks about their giving. How much do you give to the church regularly and other organizations? And since that's been out of the equation for the last few years, I have to bring it up to them.
Sure.
And that gives me an idea if they are charitable people, if they have, charitable hearts, charitable intent, and then we could, moving forward, include more of it in their tax planning.
Okay.
And their estate plan.
Sure. Now, when we, as you work with these folks, I mean, that's one of the things that goes in my head, is putting together this plan. You have to think about all of these things, and tax planning is a big part of it, especially as you get older and you are beginning to leave certain things to your family, because if you don't do that well, the recipient might be hit with some pretty hefty tax liability.
Yes. And after the break here, we'll get into some of the specifics, how you can ease that burden from those heirs. But backing up, if we just kind of exclude the tax for a minute, when you put together your basic estate plan, it's just your will or your trust, you have to think if you have an intent or desire to leave some of the charities and the church you've been giving to a percentage of your estate or your assets. Instead of just, I leave everything to my spouse and then my children, and then if they're not alive, their children or whatever. You had mentioned at the beginning of the show, leave an inheritance to your grandchildren, to your children's children, as the Bible had, the Bible verse you referenced. And most people don't do that. They just leave it to their kids. And those grandkids will never see any of the estate or the inheritance.
Sure.
If their children spend it all, maybe get divorced along the way or sued. So folks need to think about potentially including their grandchildren in the first level of the estate plan, the first tier, after the spouse, each other passes. Instead of just the kids, maybe, say you have two kids, instead of 50-50 to each of our kids, we'll go 40-40, and then the grandkids start to split 20.
Sure.
So they're getting their inheritance right off the bat. It doesn't matter how your kids live the rest of your life, their life, because your grandkids were taken care of, at least to some extent, right off the bat.
Sure, absolutely. These are good things. Now, friends, we're going to take a little break. We'll come back. We'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of what we were talking about in this segment. Take the time and go to Wayne's website at todaysretirees.com, todaysretirees.com. We'll be back right after this.
Double check that. Pretty good. Yee. Not crying, are you? Let's tighten that and... Ooh.
Wait, what was that?
What? No, don't worry about that. Here we go.
Asking the right question can greatly impact your future.
Are you qualified to do this?
What?
especially when it comes to your finances.
Do you have a question?
Are you a certified financial planner?
Yes, I'm a CFP professional.
CFP professionals are committed to acting in your best interest. That's why it's gotta be a CFP.
And welcome back to today's Retirees with Certified Financial Planner Wayne Maslyk of Great Lakes Benefits and Wealth Management. Today we're talking a little bit about giving and bequeathing. Is that the right word?
Bequest.
To your children or your grandchildren. And we talked a little bit about leaving things to a church or a charity. As we get into, we were going to talk a little bit about the specifics. So how do we determine this beneficiary, and leaving it to a charity, is that different than leaving it to a spouse or a child or a family member?
Well, many investment accounts have different titling.
Okay.
Such as IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, 457 plans, your Roth IRAs. Those types of accounts, your life insurance, your annuities, they have beneficiary designations, like a primary and a secondary or contingent beneficiary.
Okay.
And when you have a family, the way most set it up is you leave the primary beneficiary is the spouse, surviving spouse, right? And then the contingent or secondary beneficiary, they name their children.
Sure.
So, but you have more leeway with most accounts where you can add your grandchildren to the tier of secondary or contingent beneficiary. You could leave your church or charity a percentage. It's just equal math numbers, whole numbers of one.
Okay.
No fractions.
Right.
Even though we can do fractions, but just to keep it simple, you could leave a percentage to the children, 60% or 80% or 70. Say you leave 70 to your two kids, 35 and 35. You could leave 20 to your grandkids, 20%, and then you could leave 10% to your charity or church.
Okay, sure.
It's right on the beneficiary change form or update form, or if it's a new account, right when you're opening the account. Then everything is handled. If something happens, each of your desires got compensated or taken care of via your beneficiary designation. Also, people need to keep in mind the beneficiary designation supersedes your will or your trust.
Oh,
so whatever
okay.
your verbiage is in your trust or your will has nothing to do with your beneficiary designations.
So let me, if I understand this. So if I have $100,000 in an IRA, say, and I pass, and my will says that 50% of my estate goes to X, and 100% of my IRA goes to Y. Y gets the 100,000.
Y gets the 100,000, and say all the money they had was in Y.
Okay.
And their will says, I leave all of my assets or belongings or accounts, say, to X. X gets nothing because the whole estate was in Y.
Okay.
So
that's good. That's a good thing to know.
Yeah. The exception to that rule, we always talk about exceptions, is if one of the beneficiary designations was the trust.
Oh, I see.
Or the estate.
Okay.
Which you can do. And whenever you have the estate listed as a beneficiary, what happens?
All of the funds goes to the state, which goes to probate?
Estate, yes.
Oh, right.
Your estate, yes. Estate means look at my will and what my will says, and then you go through probate.
Sure.
So, and it's important to know these things. When we do the next show, too, I'm getting very specific with titling on beneficiary. I'm just giving folks ideas in this show, but our next show, if you're interested in not messing up, very important stuff on beneficiary designations, that's next week.
Sure.
So yeah, that's important. And you can be very specific in small percentages who gets what.
Okay.
So moving on, we talked about taxes a little
Right.
bit ago. So if you have a charitable intent, there are ways now, just not at your death or through your will or trust or beneficiary designations, where you can benefit from charitable donations. I'll just give some tips now. We used to do a lot of deduction stacking. Like, standard deduction was $6,000, and you gave, $4,000 to the church every year. And your property taxes and the other deductions didn't get to the six. We would talk about stacking deductions. Give to the church double your normal amount in year one. So now we're itemizing.
Okay.
And then you skip the following year, and then you kind of leapfrog every other year, and you're able to itemize and deduct. So it's harder to do that now because the standard deductions are so large. But some people can still do that, especially if you add, expensive property tax to the deal, and pay ahead on some things, medical bills, and that. It's still possible to do in some cases, just not as easy as it used to be.
Right.
You mentioned our big tax liability at death. Many of us have big IRAs, 401ks, accounts that have never been taxed. Those, again, the tax is going to get paid at some point. If you don't pay them before we're gone, if we don't get those paid, our heirs will pay them.
Sure.
So if we have any desire to leave a charity or a church some assets or funds, bequest them at our death, and the churches or charities don't pay tax, what assets are obviously the best ones to leave a church or charity? Your IRAs, your money that's never been taxed.
Sure.
Because you got all the tax deductions as you put those deposits in over the years. Now you leave a percentage to a church or charity, and they're not going to pay the tax on it.
Sure, that makes sense.
So that hunk of money, no taxes were ever paid on it.
Right.
So, if you do have a desire to leave money and you're thinking, well, I'll put it in my will or my trust, I'm going to leave 10% to church. But then you're giving all your IRAs to your kids, it would make more sense to use the IRAs to fund the charity. And, use your will to give your kids the tax-free stuff.
Sure.
Not all. I'm just saying in whatever percentages you desire. So there's right ways or better ways to leave assets to churches and charities, and there's ways that are, less effective.
Right. And that's important. And this is what you're doing. This is what you do as a certified financial planner. You sit down with these clients and you figure out these different scenarios. So that, because we talked in weeks past about some of these changes, if you don't transfer those IRAs the right way, your children or your heirs get hit with some big tax liabilities.
They can, especially for sizable accounts, and especially if your kids are or heirs, whoever your heirs are, could be nieces, nephews, brothers, whoever, especially if they're in a high income, because now your inheritance is going to get added to their income, and they, it could bump them a tax bracket, they could lose certain benefits. So, you just have to be on top of it, and that's why it's important to work with a certified financial planner professional like myself.
Sure.
Not just a broker, insurance agent, or whatever. Those people are fine, but they don't get into the nitty-gritty like a financial planner does.
Exactly, and that's why Wayne does what he does. You can set up an appointment, go in and talk to Wayne, make that phone call at 866-626-3990, 866-626-3990. We'll be back right after this.
Hi, my name's Wayne Maslyk. I'm a certified financial planner and owner and president of Great Lakes Benefits and Wealth Management. I'm making this video because I'd like to offer you, at no charge, a free newsletter that I send to all of my clients and prospects monthly. The newsletter is filled with little tidbits on investing and finances, and we have recipes But most importantly, I write a personal message in there monthly, whether it's purchasing vehicles, whether it's investing your money, passing assets to your children, trying to lower your taxes, you name it. If it has to do with financial planning, it will be in a newsletter at some point. I keep the information light, though. It's not political. We're not talking economics, nothing like that. It's fun stuff, a little bit about my family monthly, client examples of how we can help people. We won't bug you. All you're going to do is get our monthly newsletter. We keep your information safe. We don't sell it. We don't give it to any other marketer. The sole purpose is to get the word out that I am the go-to source in this area for financial planning.
And welcome back to today's Retirees with certified financial planner Wayne Maslyk of Great Lakes Benefits and Wealth Management. As we talked on the beginning of the show, Proverbs tells us that a wise man or a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And we're talking today about leaving or bequeathing or, our heirs, whoever those heirs might be, or a charity or whatever. One of the things that we haven't discussed yet, Wayne, is what if I have a life insurance policy? Are there some implications there that I should be aware of? I mean, you've already talked about some things that if you missed the earlier segments, go back and watch those.
Yeah, it's life insurance is very unique.
Okay.
And it has had a bad rap over the years. And it's just such a good tool for family planning. If you have kids in debt and you're younger, you're working, the breadwinner, or now two breadwinners. If you have two breadwinners in a home, life insurance is important to have on each of them. Too many people rely on their group insurance at work, but people change jobs so much. They leave one job, the life insurance they thought they had is gone.
Sure.
Most of it's not portable, some is. And it just pushed so much that term insurance is the best. Life insurance is a waste of money. And when you look at the math and you run the numbers and you look at the statistics, you see that term insurance, though cheap, it rarely gets paid out. That's why it's so cheap.
Right.
Like less than 2% of all term policies ever pay out a death benefit.
Oh, wow.
So I do educate my clients along the way, especially the young ones, my kids of my clients that come in and younger people that actually take the time to come in and see a financial planner, that life insurance is important. Through your later years of life, and, just as important as through the early years in life. And why is it important? Of course, we'll talk about the charitable portion of it in a minute. But we talked about long-term care planning in the past. Life insurance is a great way to replenish your heirs' estate if you happen to drain it because you needed home care for years or nursing home care for years.
Okay.
You had to dip into all those investments in IRAs because you didn't have long-term care insurance or other, just didn't get paid. We got to pay our long-term care when we get sick, if we get sick. So life insurance replenishes the estate. Term insurance likely won't be there because it's going to run out.
Sure.
By the time you're 70 in most cases. And people in their 80s need a nursing home, late 70s, and now they have no insurance. But if you have permanent insurance, not term, permanent, that takes you through your whole life, someone's getting that check.
Okay.
And if people have policies now, they can change beneficiaries like we talked about earlier. You can just, instead of your two kids, you can add your grandkids.
Okay.
You can add a church or charity. And, the doesn't cost you anything out of your expenses or your investments. You're not writing a check to the church. You're just changing it from my kids, 100%, right, to maybe 80 and 10 to my grandkids and 10 to a charity or whatever percentage you want.
Right.
That's a great way to continue the giving you've been doing every week if you go to church or the charities you've been giving to. you also give them money on the way out, just like you have been your whole life. Some people buy life insurance to cover the taxes on all the IRAs that they're, that they never pay tax on.
Right.
Because life insurance death benefit is normally tax-free.
Okay.
It's a tax-free check that somebody's getting, one of your loved ones is getting. And, the premiums, of course, you got to, they cost money. And, when I talk to folks about that, if you give $5,000 a year to a church, and you just switch mindset a little bit, and you buy a life insurance policy for the church, just say this is what we're going to leave, or any charity, you give that $5,000 to a life insurance policy every year for the rest of your life, they're going to wind up with a lot more than if you just wrote a check every week, or year to the church or charity. Just a way to expound your gift, tax-free if it's not to a church or charity, because it's tax-free then anyway. But to your kids, grandkids, or your other worthy causes. So covered a lot in this show.
Right.
We can't get into too much detail, but there's so many ways to plan for charitable bequests, and also to make sure your grandkids, on top of your kids, receive an inheritance if you so desire. If you didn't spoil them too much throughout your whole life, where you say they got enough, I don't have to give them anything.
We've already bought them all the cars.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, this is good information, and folks need to consider this. They need to come in and sit down with you and your team and say, we saw this, we heard this on the radio, we saw this on television. Take a look at what I'm doing and what I've done, and how do I fix this?
How can we apply it to our life? Right.
Sure.
And sometimes it's just a little tweak, or just doesn't take much. But, this is one small aspect of financial planning, amongst a bunch of others. So you just have to take the time, sit down, have a few meetings, cover all the bases, and believe me, at the end you have peace of mind.
And that's
knowing that
crucial.
You're doing the right thing.
Right. And just having that peace of mind, as Wayne says, that is important, so you can sleep at night.
Yes.
It's your money. You've saved it. You've worked hard for it. You've invested it, and you need to be in charge of where it goes when you pass on. So take the time. Go to Wayne's website, todaysretirees.com, todaysretirees.com, or pick up that phone and make an appointment. Go in and sit down with Wayne and his team at 866-626-3990. We'll be back next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Today's Retirees with certified financial planner Wayne Maslyk of Great Lakes Benefits and Wealth Management. Visit todaysretirees.com or call 866-626-3990 to schedule a no-cost appointment with Wayne. Today's Retirees is brought to you by Great Lakes Benefits and Wealth Management, family-focused retirement and tax planning services, anchored in family values. Information and opinions discussed on Today's Retirees do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this station. Opinions expressed should not be substituted for individualized consultation with a qualified financial advisor. For specific information, call 866-626-3990 or visit todaysretirees.com.